This is TheJewphin at the Geekly Grind. We're here with Jonathan Rogers of Grinding Gear Games. He's the
Game director?
game director. I'm terrible today. It's end of day, but we will get through this. It'll be amazing. He's here to talk to us about Path of Exile 2. So, first of all, what has the reaction been like so far at the show?
I mean, people are very excited. Path of Exile 2 plays very, very differently than how PoE 1 did. A lot of people are really keen on just the way that the combat is now. PoE 1, obviously was very good for its time and does a lot of modern things well now as well, but it just never really had the action game credentials that we're really hoping to have in PoE 2. So, I think people are very excited for that.
So you said the combat's really different this time around. What is the main difference?
So I guess probably a lot of it comes down to just introducing a lot of those kind of more modern action games things. Like, for example, we have a dodge roll, which has a dodge cancel. That means we can have longer attacks. We do a lot of effort to make sure that you always feel like you never lose control of your character. So most of the skills that you use have some kind of control built into them. So you don't just start a skill and then your character is just locked out and you can do nothing. It's like you can re-aim things while you're in the middle of it. You can cancel out of it, that kind of thing. But also all of our melee attacks now have motion as part of them. In fact, even non-melee attacks have lots of motion components to them. There's lots of things that we're doing, like, for example, we have multiple stances for the character, and then we've got different animations that we're using depending on what stance you start. So that makes combat flow a bit better because you're going from move to move without kind of having a return to idle, as it were. So just things like that we're doing that have just drastically improved our combat feels.
So what about in terms of endgame? I know in Path of Exile 1, endgame was a lot of the staying power of the game, especially into the later seasons.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of build crafting, there was a lot of grinding, there were a lot of different mechanics. Well, grinding your game,
for sure,
have to have some
yes.
grinding.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you tell us about the end game, how it's going to be similar, how it's going to be different?
So effectively, we're not talking about the specifics of the end game at the moment, but I will say is that it is still map-based. So we're still using the same kind of formula that we used in PoE 1, but everything around so the map is, I guess we'd say the mapping is the core of the sort of end game DNA at Path of Exile. But all the stuff around that is going to change. So all of the kind of both the storylines, things, but also the mechanics around progressing the end game and this kind of stuff will change. So we're not announcing that yet, but it will be available in the beta that we do in June 7th, 2024. So players will be able to play that. And, we think that's pretty important because testing the end game is a huge part of testing a game. So if we didn't have the end game, then we wouldn't be able to get it done. So that'll be a place to play.
So what about build crafting? I know in Path of Exile 1, as you went through different seasons, there were different types of builds that became powerful and then weak. Most of my favorites tended to be things like the cast on crit builds.
Right.
So what have you done to make build crafting even more diverse, to give it more power?
So probably one of the biggest things is the change to how skill gems work. So back in PoE 1, skills socketed into items. Nowadays, what we've got is a dedicated skill tree for that, and it means it seems like a pretty simple change or even a simplification, which it is to some extent, but what it means is, number one, that you can have more than one 6-link now. I mean, previously you could have one or two. Now you can have more 6-links. That means that there's a lot more customization on a per skill basis. What it also means, though, is that you've got more skill options for, you don't just necessarily have here's my main skill or something like that. You have many skills that you can choose between at different times, and that actually opens up the room for what you're doing with builds. But also at the same time, we have more ascendancy classes than before, so there's just straight up a numerically larger number of options to try. And also things like, the skill tree is technically larger as well, and things like that. Plus, and probably one of the largest change actually is the way that you can dual spec your character now. You can, at ExileCon we actually were talking about the fact that if you have multiple weapon sets, then you can have a different tree for both weapon sets. Not entirely different, but you can customize a certain number of points to be separate. And those change automatically as you change between weapon sets, which happens automatically as you use different skills. So that really opens up the number of things that you can do.
So in terms of being able to switch out your abilities, one of the things in Path of Exile 1 was a huge skill tree.
For sure.
There was a lot of focusing your character when you created them.
Sure.
So if you really wanted to play around with a different build, most times you would either have to get a lot of in-game currency to buy respec points, or you would have to re-roll a character. Are you still going for the more lockdown approach, or is this going to be more
So
relevant?
that is what we're still doing for passives, and the reason why I think that's important is because I really don't like it when you lose, I guess, the story of your character. And so what happens is, if you do a full respec of a character, at the point where you do that, your character might as well just be the same as any other character. So for active skills, we really believe in the ability to chop and change change that out. And the reason why that's important is because you don't really know what an active skill is until you try it. Like, you can see a video, you can like read the description, you can do these things, but you don't really know whether you like a skill until you've tried it out. But for passive skills, it's like you know what 6% fire damage is, right? Like you don't need a video to explain that. So basically, like for something like that, we feel that it is actually fine to have that relative lockdown, but still the ability to change it using respecs. But you can't just go from one character to another without like a bit of a journey in between. We feel that is a little bit important just to maintain the sort of the legacy of the character. Otherwise, it just feels like might as well just be the same as any other person. So yeah, that's kind of our philosophy on that.
That makes sense, and it also ties into kind of the currency of the game. And
Sure.
I know Path of Exile 1, a lot of the currency was based off of these items that create random effects,
Yeah.
and there was a huge out-of-game trading
Yeah, for sure.
between
Sure.
currencies. So are you doing something to make that economy stronger, or are you trying to change the economy in some way?
So we fundamentally still like the economy we built with regard to using currency. One thing a lot of people have noticed is that we've added gold in Path of Exile 2, but the intention of the gold is not to make it so it replaces player-to-player, the currency players use for player-to-player trade. We want gold to be more used as sort of a low-level thing that you're using to fix build problems that you have early on. And then as you kind of get towards endgame, the currency items like we had in Here We Won are much more important. But one of the things that we sort of have done with regard to crafting using currency in particular is that a lot of the effects that would require you to dump, I'm just going to sit there and re-roll this item 1,000 times, those kinds of things have been changed quite significantly to make it so that the crafting, you're more likely to use the currency you get rather than just only trading with it, and B, that you literally don't have the whole I'm going to sit here and just pump 1,000 things into this one item just like that, which was I guess it was a thing, but ultimately we prefer crafting to be a little bit more targeted. Is this item going to be good to use with this item right now? This kind of stuff.
So is it closer to the crafting recipe?
No, it actually isn't. So, for example, Chaos Orb, which was an item that re-rolled an entire item before, now only re-rolls one mod. And what that means is when you choose to use a Chaos Orb, it's because you've got an item which has got some good mods and some bad. And so it's likely that if you have an item that's almost good, you're probably going to throw 3 to 4 Chaos Orbs into that. Either it'll become really good or it'll become really bad. And if it becomes really bad, you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to craft this item anymore. If it becomes really good, you're like, well, sweet, job done. You know what I mean? So what that means is there's less the whole crafting becomes something when something's only 3 or 4 rolls away from being good, you're much more likely as a player to actually engage with that and try it out. Whereas the way it was in Here We Won, it's since crafting anything good requires 1,000 Chaos Orbs, you kind of weren't going to do that unless you actually had that, or you were a high enough level player to do that, or maybe you wouldn't even try it at all. Yeah, that's something that we feel is kind of important.
So it's kind of more minor changes. You're not doing a large scale.
I mean, you can do a lot to an item, but you do that one step at a time more, which means that you're kind of closer to a good item maybe at any given moment, or closer to a better item, I should say. And so I think that will improve the experience of crafting as well.
What about the unique items and the way those work into builds during the game and
Absolutely. So, I mean, our philosophy for uniques has always been that not every unique is necessarily better than a rare, right? Uniques are more about build-defining choices where you've got some interesting upside and potentially downside as well. You're building around the unique, but it should still be that you're filling out your build with rares, which is what we hope that people would do. So, I mean, in Path of Exile 2, obviously there's going to be tons of uniques. A lot of uniques that players have played in Here We Won will be coming back, as well as having lots of new ones. But of course, we have to reinterpret all of the stats into a sort of PoE 2 balance context, which is going to be, quite a thing to do. Obviously we want, iconic uniques like Headhunter to be coming back, that sort of thing. So there will definitely be a lot of that stuff coming back.
Yeah, Headhunter was a very good endgame unique.
For sure.
So tell me about the classes. I see there are a couple of new ones.
Yes, so in Path of Exile 1, we had every combination of strength, dexterity, and intelligence. There were actually 7 if you include the triple one. In Path of Exile 2, what we've done is we've removed the all-rounder class, so everyone is a combination of 1 or 2 attributes. But we've also got 2 of those for each one. So for example, on Strength Int, you have the Templar as one of them, and then you've got the Druid as the other. And that means that now there are 12 classes in total, and each of those 12 classes has 3 ascendancy classes that are unique to them. which means there's 36 total ascendancy classes. So yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff there.
So how do you differentiate between them? Do they start at a different spot on the skill tree, or do
They
they
actually
have?
don't. So the thing, the only like when it comes right down to it, when you are on a character selection screen, the thing that you're kind of looking for as a player, to some extent, or at least most players are, what they're looking for is some kind of stereotype to latch onto to think about how am I going to build this character. This Path of Exile's got such a free-form build system. You kind of need that initial latching to sort of just give you an idea about what exactly it is that you're going to be doing. So at the beginning of the game, the only actual difference is both what your character looks like and what skills they are offered as quest rewards, right? So those quest rewards and things like on the starting beach, like what are you getting? That's when so the game is effectively pushing you towards this, but you don't actually have to stick to it. You can actually do anything. But then later on, once you ascend, then you get 3 ascendancy classes that are specific to your character class. So towards the end game, that character choice does matter a lot because you've got what ascendancy class you're using. But at the beginning of the game, it really serves more as like that latching on point of like, yeah, what kind of character should I be? Like if you see a druid and you're like, okay, well, I can probably turn into a bear. Of course you can, and then you're going to be picking the bear skills, and then you're going to be doing stuff. But you can technically get all the skills in every character because PoE's open like that.
Interesting. So in the beginning, gameplay-wise, there's no difference between these two classes
Other than what quest
offered.
rewards you get, exactly what you're offered, and you can get the skills from other classes by getting uncut gems, which drop, and then you can.
So you can always buy to
exactly.
be the same, but it's going to, in terms of the leveling process,
exactly.
you're going to be kind of leaning towards a direction, and at the point at which that becomes irrelevant, you're at the ascendancy.
Exactly.
Class.
So in Act 2 is where the first ascendancy choice is, and then that's the point when you actually you're locking in the thing that is unique about this particular character class.
Fascinating. How many acts do you have so far?
So there's going to be 6 acts in PoE 2. But the length of the game should be fairly similar to PoE 1 as far as overall campaign length goes. Although we don't know for sure exactly about that because it's very the game is not the entire game isn't obviously finished yet. So I suspect it'll be a fairly long campaign, but we'll see obviously once we actually get to be able to play just the whole game from start to end.
So this might be a I just blanked on the word. Controversial question.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask it anyway.
Sure, go for it.
What are your thoughts in terms of rushed leveling? Specifically, going from new season, doing a different path to get to end game versus running through the entirety of the campaign?
So I'm not a fan, and the reason why is because I believe that it's really important that in each season, every player feels like they okay, if you've got a new player and you come into let's just pick an old game that it's been around for long, like World of Warcraft, right?
Sure.
You come in and you're like, okay, and you have to start at level 1 in a game like that. Because there's no seasons in the same way, it would be like, oh, I couldn't get started now because everyone else is sort of ahead of me, you know what I mean? And so I think that in a game like that what they're doing there is kind of important to make sense. But in a game with seasons, I think that it's really important to feel like, okay, I am just the same as everybody else. No one else who's played before me has got an advantage. I could be just, the only thing that differentiates me between someone who's played the game before is just skills that they have built up. So I could actually, I'm starting the game from scratch just like everybody else. And that feeling of we're all we're all starting again, I think is really important. So if some players have that advantage of I get to skip ahead and do more stuff, I feel that feels really very bad for new players. And I also think that the whole reset, the way that we do the whole season reset thing has been a huge reason why Path of Exile 1 has continued to last as long as it did. PoE 1 actually had its concurrency record this year. You know what I mean? A game that's been out since 2012, depending on how you count out. A game that's been out since 2012. It had its concurrency record recently. And once again, I think that the reason for that staying power is the whole economy reset thing that we do. And I think that having that be the same for everyone is really important. I think it's just an important sort of, almost moral thing. We're all on the same page. It's the same starting line. No one else gets an advantage.
So then, Path of Exile 2, every season you're going to start from Act 1 and you're going to play through all acts.
Yep, absolutely. Just like you did in PoE 1.
All right, so next question. In terms of mechanics, I know in Path of Exile, you guys were continuously developing it for the last 10 years.
For sure.
And during that time, you had a lot of different mechanics added. You had harvest added, you had the heists added.
44 leagues.
44 different leagues. And a lot of those ended up piling up on each other.
For sure, for sure.
Were there lessons you learned from those? Were there ones that you really liked? Were there things that you wanted to take away and put into
Yep.
Path of Exile too?
There absolutely are. So we're going to be trying to include as much of that in at least theme, if not actual exact content, in PoE2 as we can. But all of it's going to have to be rebuilt to make sense in a PoE2 context. So, for example, like there are leagues like Delve, for example. There's like a bunch of work, and we will do that work to make Delve again. But it'll work mechanically like a little different. And the other thing I think we'll take care of now is to sort of isolate the fallout of the various crafting systems a little bit more from each other. Like one of the things that, like, the complexity is obviously built up over time in PoE1, and I think that a lot of those mechanics are really cool and we should keep them. But we need to just isolate some of those crafting mechanics from each other. So what I mean by that is, let's just say, for example, this isn't actually the change that we're going to do, but for example, that Delve fossils were something that only worked on weapons, for example, or something like that. It effectively means that, like, it becomes one of the choices that you can use for like, if you're crafting weapons, this is, these are the different mechanics I can use, but you kind of don't have, like, absolutely everything all in one go like that. So I think it's something that can be good. So once again, that isn't going to be the exact way we do that, but it's like, ideally, if we can limit the different crafting systems from all of those league contents to the specific domains, we should be able to make it so that the overall complexity is lower, while still maintaining a lot of the cool mechanics that we've built up. But there will be some things we straight out remove. I have no doubt.
Would the idea be to create like a common currency, or to make the currencies work with each other?
But there are certainly some things that we'd want to. I mean, look, it's going to be case by case. Like, it's really hard to answer in generalities. But,
right.
But the overall thing that I would say is that, yeah, like, complexity is too high right now in PoE1 as far as starting again goes. I want to retain as much of the cool. Like, I want all the coolness of everything we made before. Because, that's all cool stuff. But at the same time, we do have to make sure that the complexity isn't, like, insane out of the gate, because there'll be another 10 years to get crazy complexity again over the next 10 years.
So, aside from that, are there other steps that you've taken to kind of reduce the complexity in the mechanics in the end game?
So I guess one of the things that I'd like to make sure that I'm clear on at this point is the difference between complexity and depth. So we definitely want to reduce complexity. So things like the way the skill system works now is less complex than it was before. It reduces the amount of cognitive load that players have as they're trying to engage with the skill system. But we still have to try and make sure that the depth is always there. Like, all the options you had before are still options for you. Like, that is not actually changing. So ideally, we can kind of get ourselves into a situation where we have as much, if not more, depth in PoE2 than we had before, while also having less complexity than we had before. And so that is kind of like that is what we're trying to do. And things like the skill system absolutely do that.
It's a question of how many spreadsheets a person needs to have open to understand the mechanic, right?
Hopefully 0 to understand it, but at least a few to be able to optimize to the point where you're actually like 100% the best character ever. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Excellent. Is there anything that you're most excited about for Path of Exile 2 at this point?
I mean, for me, the main thing is really the combat stuff. Like, the combat stuff really is the thing that led to the creation of Path of Exile 2 in the first place. Like, whenever Path of Exile 1 was like, and whenever awareness of Path of Exile 1 spread outside the PoE community, like when we were marketing expansion, things like that, you would often see on forums, like, the top comment in like a non-PoE1 fan-based sort of community, like a Reddit / games or something like that, they would be like, oh yeah, I tried that game, but I didn't like the combat. It's like, I really wanted to put that to bed. Like, I just wanted to be like, okay, yeah, like, sure, we've got all this complex stuff, and that's all really awesome, and that's cool, but we know how to do that. We need to be learning how to do combat really well. Like, that's the thing we're weakest at, so I think that's the thing we need to concentrate on. So that's been my focus on PoE2 for sure for a while. And obviously, I still, like, love all of the complex, like, deep skill tree stuff and everything. It's like, we're good at designing that, you know what I mean? Like, it's the combat that's harder, and that's the thing that I think that we've managed to really start to get really good at PoE2 now. And so I think the thing that's going to improve the game the most as far as, like, expanding our audience goes is, like, should be able to just play it like an action game, you know what I mean?
Are there some abilities that you feel are better suited to Path of Exile 2 that you've created for this?
I mean, like, it's more of a question that, like, by the changes that we've made, we've unlocked large amounts of design space that we couldn't even explore before. And it can be as simple as we literally have skeletons for the characters that are now like I should say rigs that are actually really good, so animators can make good stuff. But also just things like, for example, having the dodge cancel now means that we can actually have longer, some abilities that have longer attack times. Like in PoE1, all the abilities converged on a really short attack time, which they had to, because when you can't do a cancel out of them, you need a short enough attack time so that you don't feel locked in and you feel like the feedback feels bad. So it's like we've always been like our focus when we're designing some stuff is like, okay, look at what the design like what's the thing that's preventing us from being able to design stuff, and like removing that as a problem so that we can then open up that space so that we can actually start designing stuff that we've always wanted to be able to do. You know what I mean? Because like PoE1 at this point it is hard to design stuff in PoE1 because of all the constraints that we have. And so being able to like open up those constraints again and actually change stuff that's the sort of liberating thing that allows us to move forward.
Excellent. Just to have it on record, microtransactions only cosmetic.
Of course, just like PoE1. I mean, look, it is literally the same store, right? Anything you buy in PoE1 or 2 works vice versa in both games.
Really?
And
So I can still have my chicken.
Yep, you can still have everything. Yep, nice. Got one of those. Okay, cool.
I had to.
Yeah,
my
yeah,
friend
yeah.
and I both had a pet chicken following us around the entire game.
So So all of that stuff is backwards and forwards compatible forever. So that'll mean, I mean, it makes sense for us because it means that PoE1, like we're financially incentivized as a company to support PoE1 because of the fact that any microtransaction we make, anyone playing PoE1 will still be able to buy. But the other way around as well. You know, I just think it makes sense as when you've got this platform to be able to share stuff like that. At the end of the day, what most people are buying is new stuff. So it really doesn't hurt us at all to have all the old stuff that people bought before still available. And I think the players really appreciate it as well.
No, I think that's a great idea. So you said the closed beta is going to be next year.
Yep, June 7th.
June 7th of 2024. And when will it be open for the public?
So, I mean, the closed beta, while it is closed, there'll be ways to get in, so that will happen. I don't know how long the beta progress will be. Like, my hope, I mean, there'll be at least 3 months, but probably more than that, right? I mean, this isn't just like a marketing beta, you know what I mean? Like, we really do need to actually make change. Like, this is our last chance to make economic changes before, like, all the items are, like, locked in and permanent, you know what I mean? So, we have to actually, we do actually have to make sure that everything's right. So, you know, it'll take as long as that takes, that process.
Right.
Until we know that everything's great.
Excellent. Well, look forward to playing it. Thank you so much for your time.
No problem.